Oftentimes when you're developing custom Magento extensions, you're going to run into issues and have to troubleshoot some code. If you follow along with some earlier videos, we'll have already set up the Magento logging and tweaked some of the backend configuration to make our development lives a little easier. But in this video, I'm going to show you another advanced technique you can use. We'll be setting up the Xdebug third-party extension for PHP and integrating it with our IDE so that we can step through line by line and really investigate our code. So let's get started. First off, the Xdebug extension for PHP is a generic third-party extension that's not Magento specific. So you can use this process for any type of PHP project you're working on, not just Magento. So this comes in two phases. First, we need to install the Xdebug extension on our PHP server. Then we're going to have to configure our IDE to integrate with Xdebug and make our lives a whole lot simpler. So let's go ahead and open up our terminal, and we're going to have to install Xdebug to our server. So you can see I've already installed my Xdebug extension from the Ubuntu app repositories. If you followed along with our earlier installation procedure, you'll have installed Nginx and PHP FPM as our backend. The issue with running PHP FPM and the stock configuration is that PHP FPM listens on port 9000, which is also the port that Xdebug defaults to. So I can prove this to you by showing you all the listening ports. So you can see port 9000, PHP is listening on. So I need to edit my Xdebug config, which lives in etc php5 conf.d xdebug.ini. And that's specific to Ubuntu installations. If you're running a different Linux flavor, you might have to look around for that proper config file. And worst case scenario, you just plop it right into your core php.ini file. So if you just installed your Xdebug extension, all you should have in here is the line that's loading that extension. I've added a couple of lines here enabling remote debugging and just incrementing the port one digit so that it's not conflicting with PHP FPM. So a quick side note about remote debugging is that, for instance, if your server were deployed remotely, say it's in a staging environment, it's in the cloud somewhere, you can enable remote debugging, which is going to tell the server essentially it's safe to communicate with a remote debugger. So if you're a developer, you're working locally on your laptop or something, that's remote compared to the server where the code is actually deployed. And you would want to use Xdebug in this way and, for instance, tell Xdebug that your remote host is, whatever your laptop's IP is. Since we're doing this all locally, for now, I can leave this blank. Xdebug is going to default choose a local IP address as the remote host. Alright, so I save that, and now, since I'm running PHP FPM, I need to restart that service. If you are running something like mod PHP in Apache, you would just need to restart Apache. Oops, restart. So I don't have to restart Nginx because Nginx proxies things through FPM. Alright, so now you can verify that Xdebug is installed properly using PHP info page or something like that, but I'm just going to trust that I did it right this time. And we can move on to our IDE. So let's recap. Xdebug is a PHP extension that is installed from our Linux server's software repositories. After installing the extension, we had to configure it in the php.ini file and fix the port conflict that it has with PHP FPM's port 9000 by default. Once our configurations were complete, we had to restart our PHP FPM process in order for those configuration changes to take effect on the server. Coming up next, we'll continue setting up our Xdebug environment, so stay tuned.